Good Vach, everyone. Tonight, this Motzei Shabbos, is the third Melave Malke for this Kvios of Chazarah, of a brief Chazarah, a review of the Rebbe Soll Gesund Sein Siches of Shabbos and Yontif Dike Farbrengens. And as we all know, the famous Gemara, the Gemara tells us, Bitlose Zimne Have Chazake, that when something takes place 3 times in a row, this means that it's a chazake, that this is something permanent, and this will be going on, Be'ezras Hashem, for many, many years. We only hope that the 4th Melave Malke, and thereafter, we will be celebrating not here in Golis, but this will take place in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Amen. As we usually, our custom, we begin with Dvar Malchus. First thing, we do not change from our usual routine. We go over briefly the Siches of this afternoon's Farbrengen. Later in the evening, we will also give out the mashke, which we were fortunate to get from the Rebbe Soll Gesund Sein in the Koishel Brache of this past Motzei Simchas Torah, for this Shiur, for this Kvius. We will also be privileged later in the evening to have with us the famous Chassid, Reb Mendel Futterfass, who I'm sure is known to most of us for his outstanding Mesiras Nefesh behind the Iron Curtain, and he is currently the Mashpia of the Yeshiva in Kfar Chabad. Naturally, he will be speaking in Yiddish, but as part of our program, we will have somebody at intervals translating him into English so that everybody will be familiar in what he will have to relate to us. This afternoon, the Rebbe Soll Gesund Sein began the Farbrengen that today is Shabbos Mevorchim Kislev. And the Rebbe went on explaining that on one hand we find that Shabbos Mevorchim is the same concept of Shabbos Mevorchim applies actually to every month. Every month has a Shabbos Mevorchim. However, we also must say that in the detailed Shabbos Mevorchim, for example, today, that it is Shabbos Mevorchim Kislev, there is something particular in each and every detailed Shabbos Mevorchim as well. Not only in the detail of the particular month of, for example, today it being Shabbos Mevorchim Kislev, but the details that surround the Shabbos Mevorchim. In other words, on what particular date the Shabbos Mevorchim should fall out to be, and on what Kriyas HaTorah of the Shabbos Mevorchim should fall out to be, this varies from year to year. For example, today, this year, it is Shabbos Mevorchim Kislev, and we read Parshas Chayei Sarah. We can have Shabbos Mevorchim Kislev and read a different Sedra. Or, for example, naturally Shabbos Mevorchim, the Rebbe goes on, must always be in the month before the month we are blessing. For example, Shabbos Mevorchim Kislev must be in the month of Cheshvan. It cannot be in Kislev, it cannot be in Tishrei. However, on which particular date of Cheshvan it should fall out, this again can vary from year to year. Today, this year, it falls out to be on 27 days in the month of Cheshvan, Chav Zayin Cheshvan. And as the Rebbe later in the Farbrengen explained, what is so particular and outstanding and meaningful, the fact that it falls out on 27 days in the month of Cheshvan. Though one may think that all this is surrounding details that have no relevance to us, the Rebbe says each and everything which a Yid hears or sees or takes place is based in Torah. And here the Rebbe says there's a Gemara Masechta Bava Kama. And the Rebbe added on that Masechta Bava Kama is a very famous Masechta, and it is known to be one of the basic yeshivish Masechtas which everyone in a yeshiva studies. This, the Rebbe says, was many years ago as well as today. And there is a Gemara in Masechta Bava Kama, where the Gemara uses the expression, Mino hane mile de amre inshe. What is the source for the expression of people? In other words, the Gemara there takes an expression of people, an average expression, as the Rebbe adds, people does not necessarily even relate to Yidden when the Gemara uses the definition people. And here the Gemara says that when there is an expression, amre inshe, it must have a mokoyer, it must have a source. And where is the source? Naturally in Torah. And there is no such thing of incidental al pi Torah. And here the Rebbe quoted what Chassidus brings many times, the pasuk, Ansher v'hoyo kiseilchu imi keri. It's a pasuk in the Teichacha, which Chassidus interprets keri meaning mikre. Mikre in Lashon HaKodesh means coincidental. In other words, the Rebbe says, Chassidus teaches, that a Yid has no right to say that anything is coincidental. There's no such thing. Everything is al pi Torah and everything is ashgacha pratis. And if a Yid's attitude is that it is keri, it is mikre, then the attitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the same to this individual. However, when a Yid believes that the attitude from Hashem and everything that is going on in this world is not in a format of mikra, not incidental, but it is all led by the Rebishter, by the Rabbeinu Shalom, then in turn, the attitude from the Rabbeinu Shalom to the one believing so is also kemayim haponim leponim, and it is an attitude of sever ponim yafes, a response of friendliness and extreme appreciation for this feeling from the Rebishter to the Yid in turn. Based on all this, the Rebbe goes on, we must say that all the inyonim revolving the Rosh Chodesh and the Shabbos Mevachim of the month are all particularly and accurate, and everything has its source in Torah and a lesson which we nowadays can take from this inyan. What do we take? Firstly, from the fact that Shabbos Mevorchim Kislev is benched in the month of Cheshvan. Kislev, the Rebbe went on, is a very famous month. Kislev is a very special month, primarily because of the Yontif of Chanukah. Chanukah is a very outstanding Yontif. The Yontif of Chanukah, in the spiritual sense, stands for bringing spiritual light all over. There shouldn't, as the Rebbe mentioned last week already, there should not remain a spot in the world of spiritual darkness. That message of Chanukah is to bring light all over. When do we bench this month of Kislev? While we are still in the month of Cheshvan. Here the Rebbe went on, Cheshvan is a very special month. In what way? Cheshvan differs from all months that Cheshvan has no Yomim Tovim in Cheshvan. Tishrei, the month before Cheshvan, is very special. It's Muzba, it's full of Yomim Tovim. Kislev, we just mentioned, has something special. Tevis has. Shvat has Chamishasa B'Shvat. Adar, Nisan, the Rebbe counted all the months. The month that is really one that has no special Yontiv in it is the month of Cheshvan. True, the Mabul took place in the month of Cheshvan, which is quoted even in Rashi and Parashas Noach. But this, the Rebbe says, is not agreed by all. It's a machlokes of Rebbe Eliezer and Rebbe Yeshua. So again, we come to the conclusion that, according to some at least, the month of Cheshvan really has no special days in it. There is a medrash that claims that in the month of Cheshvan, Shlomo HaMelech completed the Beis HaMikdash, and the dedication of the Beis HaMikdash took place in the month of Cheshvan. However, this is also disputed by some. Not everyone agrees to it. So we really don't have that everybody should agree that there is a special day, there is a special Yontev in the month of Cheshvan. And here the Rebbe says, we see the koyach of Torah. That dafke in this month, where there are really no special Yomim Tovim, there are really no special outstanding days, no days of special meaning, And dafke in this month, the Torah has given a Yid a koyach that this is when he gains strength to be able to go into the following month, the month of Kislev. When is it that we bench this special month of Kislev? Dafke in these very plain days. In these very plain days of the month of Cheshvan, when we do not celebrate any Yomim Tovim, we do not celebrate any outstanding days. It's an average month, or even less than average. It's a month without any days of specialty. And dafke in this month, the Rebishter has given us koyches that we shall be able to prepare ourselves to go into this month of Kislev, which is a real special month in the sense that it has the Yontif of Chanukah, which is such an outstanding Yontif that uplifts the entire month and makes it a month of specialty. Together, this applies to Shabbos Mevachim Kislev, regardless when Shabbos Mevachim Kislev falls out to be. This year, as mentioned, Shabbos Mevachim Kislev is on 27 days in the month of Cheshvan. What is so special about 27 days in the month of Cheshvan? So here the Rebbe says, nowadays it's very easy. We don't have to search. We don't have to do too much research. There are Sfarim that tell us exactly what took place on every day. The Rebbe didn't mention it by name, but many times he does. There's a sefer called Dvar Yoim B'Yoimai. And this sefer tells us, did research on anything and everything that may have happened and happened on any given day. It goes on a sequence of the entire year and finds any type of thing which is in Gemara, in Medrash, in Tanakh, in Jewish history, which has transpired on any day, he tells us. What happened on the 27th day of Cheshvan? So, as just mentioned, there's a machlekes of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua when the Mabul took place. Whether it took place in the month of Cheshvan or it took place in the month of Iyar. But if we look into Rashi, and Rashi is Pshutei Shel Mikra, Rashi quotes both opinions. However, which opinion does Rashi quote first? The Rebbe teaches us that when Rashi quotes first an opinion, this shows us that this opinion is first and foremost, this is the main pshat. So the main pshat in this inyan, Rashi quotes the Pirush of Rabbi Eliezer, who claims that the Mabul took place in the month of Cheshvan. If, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that the Mabul took place in the month of Cheshvan, when did the Mabul finish? On Chav Zayin Cheshvan. 27 days in the month of Cheshvan, in other words, today. Today is the day when the Mabul ended. What lesson in Avodas Hashem can we take from the fact that the Mabul finished on this date, 27 days in the month of Cheshvan? So the Rebbe explained a twofold lesson. On one hand, by the Mabul we find the expression loads of waters, Mayim Rabim, Mayim Hazidonim. And there's a Maimer from the Alter Rebbe as well as another Maimer from the Rebbe Maharash, which the Rebbe referred to, where they explain the concept of Mayim Rabim, the worries which a person has about Parnasa. And this is also compared to the constant flow of water, because just like Machshava, thought is something which constantly flows. A person can never stop his thought. This is what Chassidus teaches us. So, here we are talking about one who has a constant flow of worries about Parnasa. He is worried. Ma'ayin Yava Yezri. Torah tells us, that the Rebishter will bench us in whatever we will do. In other words, a person al pi Torah is obligated to have some source of income. So we're talking here about an individual who is extremely worried. Where will he get Parnasa from? And the Rebbe says we're talking about a person who is past his bar mitzvah and past that stage, and he's into his teens and passed through that, and he's in his 20s. And when he thinks back, he realizes that throughout all the years he hasn't been missing anything. Hashem Yisbarach has fed him and he had everything. But still, this person is plagued with the thought, where will he get Parnasa from? And this, naturally, is in contradiction to proper betachon, which one is supposed to have in the Rebishter. Well, one has proper betachon, he knows that the Rebishter who has fed him until now will definitely keep on feeding him and his family and sustaining them from here and after as well. And as the Rebbe described it in the Farbrengen, person even before he wakes up, so as he rises in the morning, before he even has a chance to say Maidani, and he says this is something which the Yetzer Hara doesn't even want. He's schlepping his Yetzer Hara into these thoughts. So what is his first thought as he rises in the morning? Immediately he starts thinking about his business. And here the Rebbe spoke furthermore. We're talking about some individuals who not only will be thinking about the regular routine, the regular way of doing business, but what type of swindle could he do in this day so that he should be able to make a dollar and have parnasa. And these thoughts come to the person even before he said Maidani. So this is the lesson which we are to take. That on this day, this is when the Mabul stopped. In other words, the flow of Mayim Rabim, which is compared to the Daigas HaParnasa, which is also referred to as Mayim Rabim. On this day, the Mabul stopped, and Memela, this is a day when we are supposed to come to realization to stop the flow of the Mayim Rabim, of these strong, powerful waters that are interfering our thoughts and interfering our Avodas Hashem, distracting us and bringing constantly ideas and worries, and created worries, because these are not true worries, because the Rebbe has supported us until now, and as long as we will follow the path of Shulchan Aruch and advice of Shulchan Aruch, will keep on supporting us from here and after. So this day, 27 days in the month of Cheshvan, this is the day when we're supposed to come to a thought to stop the Mayim Rabbi. This the Rebbe explained on one hand. On the other hand, the Rebbe said, there's a positive lesson which we can also take from this. This, the Rebbe said, pertains to the life of Noach. Noach in the Mabul lived a life without any worries. There was no worries whatsoever. In other words, he had all his needs. Everything was there with him. What can this be compared to? It could be compared to Yemei HaMashiach type of life. But on the other hand, he had no affiliation with anyone other than the people that were in the Teva. So here it comes, the 27 days in the month of Cheshvan, when a Yid is reminded, just like Noach was told on this day that he has to part from the Teva and go out into the world, and enough of the Teva life, the same thing applies to every Yid. We are reminded on this day not to seclude ourselves into a Teva, not to try living now a Yemei HaMashiach type of life, of being separated from everyone, not having a shaychus with anyone, and being totally isolated and not utilizing our influence on other Yidden and our surroundings and so forth. And this is the reminder which we get from this day. Just like on 27 days in Cheshvan then, the Rebbe told Noach that he has to leave the Teva and stop being isolated, but getting involved with the world and with its surroundings and with its entire environment. The same thing is for us as well. This is what this day, 27 days in Cheshvan, teaches us. Together with this, 27 days in Cheshvan this year falls out in Parshas Chayei Sarah. What is the name of the Sedra? It's the life of Sarah. The Sedra tells us the details that Sarah Imenu, the wife of Avraham, the mother of Yitzchak, the details how she passed away. And Rashi comments, Kulon Shavin L'Toiva. All the days of Sarah were equally to the good. She lived for 127 years. However, we cannot differentiate between any of these years. It was good for her at this age. It was good for her at that age. Throughout all the years, she was extremely a satisfied human being. So the Rebbe asked, how can we really say that? If we look through the biography of Sarah, we find many differences throughout her life. For example, the time when she was taken to Avimelech, or the days that she was taken by Paroi, or other bad days which Sarah had, we cannot say, Kulon Shavin L'Toiva. We cannot say that all of these days are equal to in the life of Sarah. However, the Rebbe explained, Sarah's life, we're talking about things that are meaningful and positive in the life of Sarah. And as the Rebbe stressed, to Sarah, a good meal wasn't something meaningful and outstanding. and an exclusive dress or exclusive shoes with different type of heels than somebody else is wearing was also not something meaningful to a person like Sarah. Memela, when we are talking about in the life of Sarah, of inyanim which were not to her good, these inyanim did not bother Sarah. When we're talking about a personality like Sarah, it's kulon shavin letayva, because everything by her, all the inyanim of Chayei Sarah, we're talking about these inyanim that meant life to Sarah. Inyanim ruchniim. What meant life to Sarah? When Sarah was able to take care of a house full of guests and serve as a hostess to the guests which Avraham Avinu brought home, this was Sarah's chayim, this was her life. And Memela, we're talking about inyanim which were life to her, which gave her sustenance, which added to her existence. All the other bad things which Sarah had throughout her life, it really didn't bother Sarah. She went through it, but it wasn't something which had an impact on her life. When we're talking about Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, as Rashi comments, Kulon Shavin Letoiva, we're talking about these inyanim which were meaningful to Sarah. In other words, positive things which had an impact on the life of Sarah. But other inyanim which were total Gashmiistic inyanim which had no meaning to Sarah, naturally this did not affect Sarah. Memela, this was not part of Chayei Sarah, and therefore this the definition of kulon shavin latayva does not apply to this as well. Later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe spoke two intervals, Benegei and Ninyan, which he spoke about in last week's said Farbrengen, and referred to it today again in this week's Sedra, in this week's Farbrengen. And briefly, this applies. Last week the Rebbe spoke, Benegei the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Nishmaseiden, that last week was 20 days in the month of Cheshvan, and it was the date of birth of the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe also referred very great stress that it also marks, this year marks 100 years from the acceptance of leadership for the Rebbe Rashab. Why? Being that it is 100 years since his father, the Rebbe Maharash, passed away, and therefore, immediately after the Rebbe Maharash passed away, it was Uva Hashemesh, V'zarach Hashemesh, so the sun began shining again anew, and this was with the acceptance of leadership from the Rebbe Rashab, from the Rebbe Nishmaseid. And the Rebbe referred last week at length that the whole concept of Nesius, of leadership of a Rebbe, is compared to the leadership of a king, of a Melech Yisrael. And by a Melech Yisrael, we find in Halacha and Gemara and Rambam that there was a concept of Mishicha, that a king had to be anointed with special Shemen HaMishcha before he began and took over leadership. The Rambam tells us, where the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim explains that there are two kinds of oils. There was a Shemen HaFarsimen and there was a Shemen HaMishcha. The Shemen HaMishcha, the Rambam says, was used only to Malchei Beis David. However, Shemen HaFarsimen was used to Malchei Yisrael as well. It's one thing. Then the Rebbe raised the difference that we find in Rambam and Hilchos Klei HaMikdash, where the Rambam discusses right away at the beginning in the first Perek all the various inyanim which were used in the Beis HaMikdash. The Rambam there tells us that this Shemen HaMishcha was exclusive to be used only for the Kohen Gadol, who required Shemen HaMishcha, or a Melech. However, as Melucha went from generation to generation, in other words, a son who took over kingdom from his father, if there was no one arguing his kingdom, then there was no need for him to have this Shemen HaMishcha. And the Rebbe also tied it in to today's Haftarah. In today's Haftarah we read about the passing of David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech taking over the kingdom from David. Being that Adoniyahu disputed Shlomo is taking over the kingdom, that is why we find that Shlomo also required this Shemen HaMishcha to be put on him. So the Rebbe is learning that we find that this Shemen HaMishcha was put on Shlomo while David HaMelech was still alive. Though his kingdom did not get into effect until his father David passed away, so we see that Shemen HaMishcha could be put on one even much before he officially takes over the active kingdom, the active leadership. And the Rebbe referred to a Gemara, Medrash, that tells us that David HaMelech passed away on Shabbos, and David HaMelech was begging from the Rabbeinu Shalom, why should he have to pass away on Shabbos? Let the Rebbe to give him one more day, he should be able to go into Sunday. And the response from Hashem was that Ein Malchus Noigas Bechavata Afilu Kemolei Nimo, that one kingdom does not touch the other, even with the slightly, with a trifle, even with like the size of a hair. And being that it has already came the time for Shlomo HaMelech to take over leadership, therefore David HaMelech has to pass away. However, when was Shlomo anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha? This was done upon the advice of David while David was still alive. When did Shlomo become a Melech? After David passed away. So we see that this Shemen HaMishcha can be put on a person even before he actually becomes a Melech. The Rebbe referred to an interesting episode we find in the Sichos of the Frierdiker Rebbe. That here the Rebbe says we read Sichos, we are used to reading Sichos, and we go through it fast and we don't pay attention to inyanim which require attention. And the Rebbe said that there is a Sicha from the Frierdiker Rebbe where he describes how the Tzemach Tzedek was talking to his son, the Rebbe Maharash, and to his grandson, the Rebbe Nishmas Hayed. Rebbe Chashab, who we're talking about, was a child at the time. And the expression of the Tzemach Tzedek was that the Heiliker Pach Hashemen, the holy little jar of oil, which corresponds to the thought of Mishicha, of anointing one with oil, Shemen HaMishcha, which the Rabbeim, from the Baal Shem Tov, through the Magid and Alter Rebbe and Mittler Rebbe, have given, related one to another, and passed on to the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek was saying then that he is passing on this Heilig Epach Hashemen to the Rebbe Maharash, his son, and to his grandson, the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Reb Shalom Ber, the Rebbe Nishmas Hayed. So from this expression of the Tzemach Tzedek, we again see how Meshicha, which this was a spiritual type of Meshicha which was done to the Rabbeim, which is similar to the Meshicha done to a Melech, this Meshicha can be done many, many years in advance. It was done to the Rebbe Maharash simultaneously as to the Rebbe Nishmas Hayed. The Rebbe Nishmas Hayed at that time was a child, must have been 4 or 5 years old at the most, because he was 5 years old when his grandfather Tzemach Tzedek passed away. And the Rebbe Maharash at that time was his father, but it was still during the life of the Tzemach Tzedek. And the Rebbe Maharash did not take over leadership until the Tzemach Tzedek passed away, which also was probably quite a few years later. So from here we see, the Rebbe says, that there was an inyan of Meshicha can take place even prior to one's acceptance of the yoke of leadership. And the Rebbe, discussing this, also raised the issue, when did Yehoshua, who was the follower of Moshe Rabbeinu, when did he take over? He took over, obviously, when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. There's a famous Rashi in Chumash, which the Rebbe discussed this year, that the last Shabbos of Moshe was a Shabbos led by both of them. It was led by Moshe and Yeshua as well. So from there and after, Yeshua was already the Nasi. Where is it do we find if Yeshua received this Shemen HaMishcha? And it's an interesting thing, which there's nowhere any mention of it. When was Moshe Rabbeinu Mosheach Yeshua with this Shemen HaMishcha? B'negei Shaul HaMelech, the Rebbe says, we find the machlokes between the Radak, who is a Mefeirish in Tanakh, and the Rambam. The Radak in Tanakh tells us that which oil was used on Shaul HaMelech, the Shemen Afarsimen, the oil which was in later years used on Malchei Yisrael. The Rambam In Hilchas Malachim, when the Rambam discusses all of these inyanim about Malachim and the Shemen HaMishcha, there the Rambam uses the expression that Shaul HaMelech received his Meshicha as well from the Shemen HaMishcha. In other words, this oil that is used for Malchei Beis David. The Rebbe also alerted to a difference in Lashon. We know when we're talking about the Rambam, every word and every single word is extremely accurate. In Hilchas Klei HaMikdash, the Rambam uses the expression that the Melech who has received the Shemen HaMishcha, it comes to show us Shezehu Melech Levadoi, that he and only he is a king. When the Rambam in Hilchas Malachim discusses all the details of the Shemen HaMishcha, the Rambam does not add on this additional interpretation regarding Shemen HaMishcha. So the Rebbe asked, Hilchas Malachim is the original source where the Rambam to discuss everything regarding a Melech. Why doesn't the Rambam here also say the same thing which he says in Hilchas Klei HaMikdash, that when a Melech receives the Shemen HaMishcha, it is there to show Shezehu Melech Levadoi, he is the king and nobody else is a king. And the Rebbe explained it, that being that the Rambam in Hilchas Malachim discusses both Shmanim, he discusses the Shemen HaFarsimen as well as the Shemen of Shemen HaMishcha. Shemen HaFarsimen was used on whom? On Malchei Yisrael. Shemen HaMishcha was used on whom? On Malchei Beis David. The Rambam here cannot say that the Shemen, one who receives the Shemen, comes to show that Shezehu Melech Levadoi, he and only he is a king. Very simple. Because there's Shemen HaFarsimen that at the same time was being used on the Malchei Yisrael. So there were other kings at the same time. There wasn't only a Melech. In Hilchas Klei HaMikdash, the Rambam discusses Malchei Yehuda. And there he discusses the fact of Malchus Beis David, that Melucha belongs only to them. Naturally, while Malchus Beis David was in the position that there were no other kings, there were no Malchei Yisrael, he was the only Melech. But in Hilchas Malachim, the Rambam, in Hilchas Malachim, the Rambam is telling us all the different dinim of Malachim. And being so, he's telling us that Malchei Beis David used Shemen HaMishcha. Malchei Yisrael used the Shemen HaFarsimen. If so, the Rambam cannot say that this comes to show that he and only he is a king, the one who the Shemen HaMishcha was used on him. Because at the same time, there is a person who Shemen HaFarsimen was used on him, who? Malchei Yisrael, and he is also a king. Rebbe concluded that, talking about these inyanim, that what we really should hope for is just like B'negei Korbanos, and B'negei learning the inyanim of the Beis HaMikdash. It says in Svarim that learning the inyanim of Beis HaMikdash brings and hastens the building of the Beis HaMikdash. We should have the actual Beis HaMikdash. So the Rebbe uses the same expression as B'negei, us learning now these inyanim that deal with the Meshichas Melech, that hopefully in the near future we should have the coming of Mashiach, who's Malkom Mashiach. Mashiach stems from the same word as Mashiach, as Mashiach, which we're talking about right now, the anointing of a Melech. We should have the coming of Mashiach, and all these inyanim should be an actuality. Later in the Farbrengen, as usual, the Rebbe learned the Ha'orah and the Zohar HaKodesh with the commentary of his father. And it's something in this week's Sedre where the Zohar quotes the Pasuk, Minosan le'meshisa Yankov, and the Zohar talks about the Golas. And then the Zohar says that the Rebishter will bring together all of Nitrei Yisrael, because here the Rebbe raised that there is a machlokes. What will take place first? Will the Rebishter build the third Beis HaMikdash first, and then gather all the Yidden out of Golas? Or will all the Yidden be gathered out of Golas first, and later the Beis HaMikdash will be built? So the Rebbe says that we see from this Zohar here, it's based on a pasuk, Beinei Yerushalayim Hashem, Nitri Yisrael Yechanes. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu will rebuild Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash, And at the same time also, Nitrei Yisrael Yechanes will gather Yidden from all over Golis. So the Rebbe is learning that the Zohar is following the Psak Din of the Rambam. That what the Rebbe will do first is build the Beis HaMikdash, and after the Beis HaMikdash will be built, then the Rebbe will bring all the Yidden from all the various Golis and bring them all to Eretz Yisrael. And here the Rebbe explained that actually there are two ways of doing it, as we see the Machlokes. There is one opinion that holds that the first thing, the Rebbe should take all the Yidden out of Golis. Why? Because if the Rebbe will take all the Yidden out of Golis, then the building of the Beis HaMikdash will be a different one. It'll be a different Beis HaMikdash. If the Beis HaMikdash is constructed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and all the Yidden are together, all the Yidden are united, then it's a different type of a Beis HaMikdash already. However, here the Rebbe says, here we see the strength of Avas Yisrael. The Rebbe says, we've been talking lately so much about Avas Yisrael and Achdas Yisrael. The Rebbe says he's talking so much about Avas Yisrael that while talking about it at the Farbrengens, even those that are asleep during the Farbrengen, when he starts talking about Avas Yisrael, he starts talking about it so strong that it even wakes them up. So the Rebbe says, he says, though they are sleeping on a Shabbos afternoon and such a suitable place to sleep as a Mokem Kodesh like the shul is, but still, it's more appropriate to be up, naturally, and to be able to participate in the Farbrengen. But the Rebbe keeps on stressing lately the great importance of Avas Yisrael and Achdas Yisrael, which ultimately will bring to Achdus Yisrael a total unity of all the Yidden. Here the Rebbe says, here again we see a stress on Avas Yisrael, that rather to build the Beis HaMikdash first, and if the Beis HaMikdash will be built first, this will be a stronger way to get all the Yidden together out of Golis, and get them out of Golis and bring them to Eretz Yisrael to be able to be with the Beis HaMikdash. And while talking about Golis and Geula, here the Rebbe referred that unfortunately now we are still in Golis. And there is no definition that can say that today we are living in a time of Aschalta de Geula, a beginning of Geula. And here the Rebbe referred to those that hold that with the founding of Eretz Yisrael, it's already a beginning, state of Israel, in other words, Medinas Yisrael, it's already steps of Geula. The Rebbe says we can definitely not say that. There was no time in Jewish history that was such a confusion for Yidden, and with a hatred from Goyim to Yidden, the halacha of Esav Seine LeYankiv was so obvious and so strong as it is nowadays. So the Rebbe says it's definite that we cannot claim the era we are living in as a time of Eschalta de Geula. And here the Rebbe spoke very strongly about the situation currently in Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe claims and tells us that the difference of opinion between the people of heads of military who claim and who wanted to do the job in Lebanon in a very fast way and according to their plans it would have saved many, many lives and many casualties. However, it is just due to the thinking of the politicians who are constantly with this feeling and with this ego, what are the Goyim going to say? And because of that, they slowed the Miftzah of Shalom Galil in Lebanon, and many, many other things. He says, these people, these individuals, these politicians, when they walk into the streets of Eretz Yisrael and confront themselves with the Yisaimim and Almanis from the various wars, the Rebbe expressed himself, something which is very hard to say, but it is derech hateve, it is their fault that these children are left as Yisaimim and these women are left as Almanis. Because if everything would have been done properly, and halachically, and he says, Al Pi Torah, this is the way to do it. And what these politicians go ahead and do, the Rebbe says, is they're looking for somebody where they could buy a Das Torah opinion that should agree with them to hold back on the Milchama in Lebanon, or in previous wars, the same thing. The Rebbe says we don't have to look far. This is an open halach in Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch tells us exactly what we are required to do in such a time. And here again the Rebbe referred to the famous siman in Hilchos Shabbos about Akum Hatzorim ala Yoros Yisrael, when Goyim surround cities that where Yidden live, where Yidden have their residences. Even on Shabbos, it is our obligation to go out and protect the lives of the Yidden. Furthermore, as the halacha in Shulchan Aruch is, even al iskei kash v'teven, even if these Goyim, all they claim they don't want to harm the lives of the Yidden. What they claim is they want only materialistic requests. Iskei kash v'teven. The halacha in Shulchan Aruch is that we are supposed to be ready even on Shabbos to go out and take part in such a milchama. Alachas kama v'kama, how much more so is it when we are talking about a situation where the Jewish lives are simply in danger. And the Rebbe spoke about it very, very strongly, with a lot of ache and pain, and the Rebbe felt extremely bad on the existing situation in Eretz Yisrael, how people are misled, and because of feelings of weakness to Goyim. The Rebbe says the Goyim remain the same Goyim to us. And as we are still in Golus, regardless we will have to come on to the Goyim. So why not do things the right way? And if we will do things the right way, at least we will be in a position of saving hundreds and hundreds of Jewish lives and preventing hundreds and hundreds of casualties. The Rashi which the Rebbe learned in this week's Chazarah is a Rashi in Parshas Chayei Sarah. Kapitel Chav Daled, Pasuk Nun Hey. Psukim are telling us about Eliezer fulfilling the mission of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu gave him a mission to go ahead and find the shidduch for his son Yitzchak, for his only son Yitzchak. And the Torah tells us exactly in detail what Avraham Avinu told Eliezer to do, and the entire procedure. Eliezer was put under oath. Avram gave a shtar, he gave a document along with Eliezer, showing that all his earnings and all his possessions, whatever he owns, he writes over to his son Yitzchak. And all this was given to Eliezer to go out and fulfill this important task and mission. Finally, the Torah tells us all the details how Eliezer met Rivka. And the pasuk says, "Vayechlu vayishtu," and Eliezer came to Rivka's home, and they had a meal there. And vayakumu baboker, and he rose in the next morning. Vayemer shalcheni la'adoni, and he said, "Please send me off to my master." Vayemer achia ve'ima, so her brother and mother said, "Teishev hanara itonu yomim oser achar teilech." Why should Rivka go right away? Let us stay here at least for another year or 10 months, as Rashi says pshat. So Eliezer begged them, please not. Vayomer aleim al ta'achu oisi. Hashem itzliach darki. You saw that Hashem has made my way successful. Shalchuni ve'elcha la'adoni. Send me so that I should be able to go to my master. Vayoimru nikro la'nara v'nishal espi, as the psukim go on. So the Rebbe raised a very strong question, which al pi pshuti shal mikra, as we are learning pshat here in Rashi. It's something which requires understanding. Rashi tells us that Psuel, Rivka's father, passed away. Was poisoned. He prepared to poison Eliezer, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu in turn poisoned him. If Psuel passed away on that day, there's something which we refer to as Shiva, which Rivka, as well as the entire family, had to observe on the passing of Psuel. So they begged that Rivka should remain with them at least 12 months, at least 10 months. Why isn't there any mention here about the Shiva? If not 10 months, if not 12 months, at least let Rivka wait till the Shiva passes. Till passes the Shiva of the passing of her father. And the Rebbe reminded us about the Mabul. By the Mabul we find that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was ready to bring the Mabul, HaKadosh Baruch Hu postponed it with 7 days. Why? Because Misushelach, who was a tzaddik, passed away then. So the Rebishter wanted to wait until the Shiva of Mesushelach will finish. Here we're talking about a Mabul, which 120 years preparation for the Mabul was going on by Noach. Built a table. It was something which affected the entire world. The Rebishter realized that the entire world did not act properly, and that is why the Rebishter wanted to bring a Mabul on them. Tremendous Indian, a major issue. Still, HaKadosh Baruch Hu held back this major issue for 1 week. Why? Because of the passing of Mr. Shalach. So if we're talking here in the family of Rivka, where her own father passed away on that day, it would be extremely appropriate to wait. Okay, Eliezer turned down their request of waiting 12 months and 10 months, but at least the waiting of Shiva should have been fulfilled. Or on the other hand, at least they should have asked, let us at least wait 7 days till Shiva will pass from the passing of a father. And there's no mention of it here in Chumash or Rashi or any of the Mefarshim, nobody mentions it. Rabbi explained that the answer to this lies in the words of Eliezer. In the next pasuk, Eliezer says, "Vayomer aleim al ta'achroisi, Hashem hitzliach darki." What is he stressing? Hashem made his way very successful. What's the pshat? Very successful. So we read in Rashi, in the psukim, that he had kfitzas haderech. The way should have taken him much longer, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu performed a miracle, and he went much faster than this amount of mileage would have normally taken. So we see here that HaKadosh Baruch Hu rushed this in the darki. We see that the whole system here was that the Rebishter Avraham, everybody here wanted that it should be extremely successful and extremely fast. Avraham Avinu called Eliezer, put him under oath. Now naturally, after Eliezer received such a mission from Avraham Avinu, we can understand that Eliezer, the Rebbe says, didn't go back to sleep. Eliezer immediately got ready, packed his bags, and got ready that he should be able to go out and fulfill the mission. Took the gemalim, took all the means of travel which he required in those days, and went out on his way right away. And we see that the Rebishter performed such a ness that on the very same day that he left, Hayim Yotzasi, Hayim Basi, the day he left Avram, the very same day he arrived by Eliezer. He arrived by Rivka and Psuah. So we see that the Rebishter is out that this thing should rush. Furthermore, the Rebbe says, being that he had a shtar with him, and a shtar is a legal document, a shtar is in effect on that day. The shtar had a date on it, and it was with that day's date. So we see how time was of extreme essence in this whole issue. Remember, this is what Eliezer is telling them. Al ta'achroisi, v'Hashem hitzliach darki. If you already see how the Rebishter made successful my way, that my way, instead of it taking many, many days, did not take that long. It was Hayim Yatzasi, Hayim Basi. Today I left, and today I came. In other words, the day he left Avram, the very same day he arrived at Rivka's. If the Rebishter performed such a ness, so we see that the Rebishter wanted that this whole Indian should work extremely fast. If we want this whole Indian to work that fast, then there is no room to think that Rivka should stay even another day here, and he immediately has to bring Rivka back right away to Yitzchak and to Avram. Once they receive this response from Eliezer, how Eliezer is stressing Hashem Hitzliach Darki, that he has to leave because the Rebishter has made his way a very successful one, meaning that everything here has to be done very fast. So there was no room for them to ask anymore. Maybe Rivka should say until after the Shiva of her father. There's no time for that, because we see that Eliezer in his response left no room for any waiting whatsoever. Not only the waiting that they suggested 10 months or a year. No waiting at all. Immediately on that given day, they had to take Rivka and go back right away. So that is why the Rebbe says there's no mention here. There's no mention here of anything of the fact of Rivka's wanting to stay another 7 days, because we see that this whole Indian had to be rushed to the fastest way possible. to Zender Farbrengen, again the Rebbe alerted. The Rebbe again reminded us that it's an extreme, proper and appropriate time now for all of the Mivtzoyim, particularly all these Mivtzoyim that have a shaykhs to Chanukah. Chanukah is also a proper time for Mivtza Chinuch, because as Svarim tell us, the word Chanukah stems from the word Chinuch as well. So it's a proper time to see to it that each and every child gets a Jewish education. It's also a proper time today to talk about Mivtza Neshek, to see to it that every Jewish woman or girl should sing Shabbos Lech, because this is what we read about in this week's Sedre, how when Rivka came into the tent of Sarah, her Shabbos Lech lasted from one Shabbos to the other, as did the Shabbos Lech of Sarah. So it's something which reminds us on the importance of Shabbos Lech. And in general, a reminder for the importance of all the Mivtzoyim, that it is an extreme proper time for them right now. And particularly stressing this much the inyan of Avas Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael, as a responsibility of Avas Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael, to see to it, to reach out, that every Yid should have an ois in the Sefer Torah HaKlali. Those Yidden that until now do not have an ois in the Sefer Torahs, it is our obligation to reach to all these Yidden and see to it that they all have an ois in these general Sefer Torahs that are being written to unite Klal Yisrael. We'll pause now for a few minutes, start giving out the mashka of the Rebbe, and we'll sing a proper nigun from Lava Malkedik and nigun, and then we will go on with the program.
You only need to say that. Right, no? Ich rate mal, ne? Ich bin ein Maschbeck, versteht? Also wie eine Maschine. Ihr sagt, gib ich rüber.
Der Rebbe redet die ganzen Dinge. Wir gehen Woche und der Richter sein zu wissen sich alles. In Gashmis, dann rufen sie sich.
Jetzt kann ich sagen, was du willst. Das ist nicht gechillig.
Und der Falschmaske.
So says like this. The Rebbe is speaking. The Rebbe is speaking throughout Chodesh Tishrei. Throughout Chodesh Tishrei, the Rebbe is talking and stressing and emphasizing the whole time about Lechatchila Riber. That's one thing. Another point that he's saying the whole time, he talks about Avos Yisrael, the first of all the Mitzvahim, and then now the Rebbe has added another point to the Avos Yisrael. It's not just Avos Yisrael, it's Achdus Yisrael. So we have to understand like this. What's Lechatchila Riber? It's a good, nice phrase. It's very nice. You say Lechatchila Riber. It sounds good. Lechatchila Riber. But what does it really mean? So the Rebbe said all kinds of madregas. There are those who, when the Rebbe said, they understand in the first place. There are those who don't want to understand. It's good, it's gishmak, it's nice, you're singing niggin, it's fun, it's great. Who has to understand? Why understand? And there are those who, even when you tell them, they don't understand anyhow. So we have to aim for the middle over here. And once we understand what the Achdus Yisrael, why is it different than Avos Yisrael, automatically the Lechatchila Riber will fall into place. We'll understand that too. How is this how do they tie in together? When you say Avos Yisrael, when you have Avos Yisrael, that means that there are two people, there are two separate entities, two distinct things. There's the one who loves and the one who is loved. There's A and B. Reuben like Shimon. So Reuben and Shimon is Shimon, and two separate people. Take, they love each other and there's Ava between them. Fine and good. But they're two separate people. Now, let's say a person that has a body. In the body he has two hands. It is shach to say that it makes sense to say that the right hand loves the left hand. That the left hand loves the right hand? No. They don't love each other. Why don't they love each other? Because they're the same to begin with. They're one entity to begin with. They can't love each other because they're the same thing. A, not like A loves B, they're both A. That's it. That's the goof. The same thing when one person has a simcha. The shach to say like this. One person likes the other person, therefore he feels Since the person who I love has a simcha, the simcha is transferred to me too. I'm going to be happy because the one who I love is also happy. That's one way of approaching it. There's another point. It's not that the other person has a simcha. It's my simcha. If he has a simcha, it is my simcha. Just like we see that if you're about to attack somebody, if you want to hit his left hand, the right hand will rush to protect it. Right hand, why are you protecting left hand? You're not being attacked. You're safe. No one's attacking you. Why are you rushing to attack the left hand? Because you love the left hand? No, not because you love the left hand. Because this is him. That's why you rush to protect the other one. Because this is him. When it comes to a simcha of another yid, we don't just share in this simcha because it's a mitzvah of Avos Yisrael. And Avos Yisrael should be what's happening by another yid. It's our business. We have to know to the amount of the other person has a pot and it's cooking. We have to know whether there's anything in the pot. Probably referring to the story in Gemara that there used to be someone who was very poor. When it came out of Shabbos, they made him his stomach, out of Shabbos like in Kochen. Oh. Yeah.
Some Sefer, die werden in der Talmud. Erst, ein Talmud gewinnt, ein guter Talmud. Gelernt in der Schiebe und Chassene gehabt und dann soll die Formen in der Stadt werden nach Rauf. In der größten Stadt hat man genug für Rauf. Segnet sich mit seinem Reben, mit Sam Sefer. Sagt ihm, dass der Sefer ist, ich habe sich eine gesagt. Du bist doch vorne, es werden nach Rauf. Und sagen alle, meine, du Pudim musst nicht sagen, bis mir, sagen, bis mach. Wenn ihr dem Meicho, du Mechillig Mure. Thomas, du sagen, deine, du Pudim, bis mir, sagt er das.
Ja, das ist halt. Okay.
Das ist immer ein Joker.
All right, this is an aside. It'll come in later. It'll come in later. Good. The first idea, the word from Reb Levi Yitzchak Baditcheve, that Mendel said before. It said like this. It said that when people came to Avraham Avinu, how did Avraham Avinu attract people to Yiddish, not the Yiddishkeit, to the idea of the Eibishter Bechlal? How did he bring them close to the Eibishter? He had a tent in the middle of the desert, and people would come in and eat by him. And after eating, he's saying, "No, now bench, blessed he who said in the world was created." So the Levi Yitzchak Baditcheve asked, so why didn't he ask them before they ate? He's going to ask them if the bracha achroina, if they're going to make a bracha, make sure that they say a bracha before they eat, instead of having them eat. And then you have to hope that they'll say a bracha. And you have to argue with them. If they don't want to make a bracha, give them trouble. Here you have a good condition. If you don't eat, no food. This way you make sure. Why didn't he bother them for the bracha rishoina, only the bracha achroina? It's just like this. Who came to him? The Arabs. Arabs wandering in the desert. And they came to Avraham Avinu. He wanted to make a bracha shoin from an Arab to a bracha right away. That's such a big jump. He can't have such a jump. He had no shaykhs to Kedusha. Once he came to Avraham Avinu and he ate by him. He was a doirach. He was his guest. He was mizakeh. He allowed Avraham Avinu to practice achnosas orchim with him. So the Kedusha of Avraham Avinu transferred somehow to him too. Oh, he had already a shaykh to Kedusha. Now we can start talking about brachas. When you come to another yid, you want to take an interest in him, to go right away, hey, you have a shir, you have a yidhaven barichas, you do this, you do the good, and you do this, you do that. You can't go right away. You have a shaykh to another yid. First of all, you have a shaykh in Gashmirs, what's doing by him, does he have enough to live on, what's doing by him in his temple, what's going on in his pot. Then you have a shaykh in the Ruchnis too. It could be that the Gashmirs is even more important in the different ways than the Ruchnis. The Achtus and Gashmi is even more important than the Ruchnis. So this is Achtus Yisrael. Achtus Yisrael means that we feel toward each other not like two people who one of them has loves the other one. No, we're l'chatchila one guf. L'chatchila one guf. Now, how does this tie in with l'chatchila ribes? Because if we're two people and we have to treat each other with love, with avos kamoicho, you have a problem. You have a problem. One person can think of machshavah about the other one. He doesn't like something the other one did. Ahin, ahead. We're all tops. We're baining him, right? We all have nefesh habahamis. Nefesh HaBahamis is then, it gives us trouble. It throws in its own thoughts and its own desires and its own will. And we have to fight with it. That's the job of a Beinoni. To fight with Nefesh HaBahamis. So it's a constant battle. It's a tzorah. Every time you have to battle and combat the machshavas of Nefesh HaBahamis. The problem. That's not arunta. That's going underneath. Doing it the hard way. Here we come to Chatchila Rebbe. Chatchila Rebbe means that by being immersed in Chassidus, by learning and davening, we come to be mevara the midas. That the person himself, his own midas, his own feelings are different. But Derech Mameli, he feels that the other person is part of him. So he doesn't have to go thinking of ways to combat the Yetzer Hara. Who tells him to go against the other person, to dislike the other person, just like he doesn't have to combat the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara doesn't come to tell you to hate yourself. You think Machshavah Zorah is about yourself. You don't have to fight the Yetzer Hara for it. Why? Because you feel that this is you. This is you. You don't have to fight the Yetzer Hara to who wants you to dislike yourself. No such fight. When you mevared the midas, you go to Chatchila Rebbe, you don't have to avoid the whole battle, the combat, the constant combat with the Yetzer Hara. You avoid by going over him, by going over his head. Where do you have the combat? Only when the midas are no good, and you have to fight the machshavas which come from those midas. If you mevared the midas, if you elevate your midas, what happens is that you don't have the combat anymore. So by this idea of Achdus Yisrael, and through the Chatchila Rebbe, what happens is that we avoid the whole issue, and we're able to, Mekayim, the Medler quoted from the Geretz HaKodesh, the Alter Rebbe said like this, interesting comparison. Ish es ro'as re'eu, al tachshavu bilvavchem. Do not think evil of one another, and if such a thought should arise in you, push it out of your mind, mamish, like a thought of Avodah Zorah. That's how far it goes. Mamish, like a thought of Avodah Zorah, you should repulse any thought of evil about one another. How to take a shaykh? Only when we're mevared ourselves to the extent that we feel that the other one is us, that he is me. Now, the Mendel said a general introduction. I have to tell you about this. That yeah, a general introduction. You understood yourself as a joke. It's assumed that we understand it's a joke. All right. The Chassam Sofer had a Talmud, had a student. He learned by him for many years, and when it came time to go away, the Talmud was going to go away to become a Rav in a different city. So before he left, he took leave of his Rebbe. Goodbye, Rebbe. Goodbye. The Chassam Sofer says to the Talmud like this: what's going to happen? You're going to go to some distant place. You're going to become a rabbi. You're going to say all your drushes. And who did you take all the drushes from? I know. You got them from me. But you're not going to say it from me. It wouldn't be fitting. So you'll just say it. And everybody will think it's your own brainchild. So you should know, I'm moichel you. No problem. Say whatever you want in my name. But should you say your own Torahs and say them in my name, that I don't forgive you. So I'm the duty bound only to repeat exactly what I hear. Yeah, that's when the gay Achdus Yisrael, and Mendel brought the dogma, the example that Rebbe brings quite often. We find the paradoxical din. On the one hand, in the Sefer Torah, you have to have distinct letters. Every letter has to be distinct and separate from the other letter. If the Beis in Bereishis is going to touch the Reish from Bereishis, no good, it's possible. Now, if every letter represents a Yid, and you're trying to get all the Yidden together, the best thing, the Beis and the Reish should completely merge, they should stand with each other, you shouldn't even be able to tell them apart. No. They have to be Befedish, distinct, separate. On the other hand, Alifaz was a no goodnik. Never mind what he was exactly. There's no goodnik. When it's said in the Torah the name Alifaz has the Aleph. If you're missing the Aleph of Alifaz, the Sefer Torah is possible. Who needs Alifaz? Who needs his Aleph? No. If you're missing the Aleph and Alifaz, the whole Sefer Torah with Moshe, with Aaron, with all of the... I said Sadibrit. Oh, it makes it too late. I said Sadibrit. Everything is possible. Why? Because you're missing the Aleph of Alifaz. So we have the two paradoxical things. We have to realize that when there's another person, we have to think about his needs. We have to think about the other person, what he needs. He's a distinct person. He's he. On the other hand, at the same time, we have to realize that we're part of each other. Not just Av Yisrael, but Ach Yisrael, like one big body.